Hey y'all, welcome back to Steel and Style with Eli here and my co-host Caleb Daniels. Of course, myself with 1776 Duck and Caleb with Commando Bond. We're back. Yeah, it's February 2025. We've been meaning to do an episode for a long time. Just haven't had the opportunity, the time to do it.
Life comes at you pretty fast.
Yeah, and I think we're in that season, if you will, of things coming at you pretty fast. So, unfortunately, that means some things take a back seat, and this podcast, unfortunately, fell victim to that. So, we are in the car together, so we figured, of course, you're going to have to deal with a little bit of road noise. We'll try to clean it up as best as possible. But, that is something that's there. So, we're on the way back from Rock Island auction. But before we get too far into the weeds with this episode, we want to quickly shout out our sponsor, Guns.com. We love Guns.com. Of course, if you're in the market for a certified used gun, that's certainly a good place to look. We're at Rock Island Auction this weekend, and that's obviously a fantastic place.
Yeah.
But the experience is completely different. Of course, as we're going to talk about, there is a level of adrenaline with Rock Island versus, of course, rather than having to wait for a auction date, Guns.com, you can go and peruse and purchase at virtually any time. If you want to do it at 1 o'clock in the morning, as one does, which I have done before, you of course can do so. So Guns.com, make sure you let them know we sent you. Thank y'all so much for supporting us and Guns.com. Let's get into the episode today.
Absolutely, man. So we're heading back to Texas, actually, Dallas area. We drove down from Kansas City. It's been a while. Day one, preview day. After, see it before it goes up on the block, because let me tell you, day 2, day 1, and those guns could maybe be on.
Yeah, and I think we do need to clarify, of course, because of Caleb's baby shower, which we're not upset about, by the way. It's a fact of
life
life.
comes at you fast.
Yeah, because of Caleb's baby shower, we were actually on the way back to Kansas City tonight, so we only were able to be in town for one day of the auction, so we had to make it count. And, kind of expanding a little bit on what Caleb was talking about, the viewing day is honestly the most important day of the auction. And let me give you some reasons why. Number one, I think it's fantastic. If you're someone who loves firearms, if you love vintage firearms, dude, it's just awesome.
It's walking into the best curated gun store you've ever been in person.
Imagine going to a museum of arms, small arms, and being able to not only touch any of them, but buy them, potentially. Yeah. And, that was the thing that almost couldn't register in my brain was the fact you could handle pretty much anything you wanted.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we had...
Worst case, they're like, we're going to give you a set of gloves for you.
They give you a set of gloves. That's no big deal. But, from extremely rare early percussion revolving shotguns from Colts Manufacturing to your Beretta submachine gun.
Oh, yeah. Or in between that, too. I mean, there was flintlocks from the Revolutionary War era.
Absolutely. And, it is crazy. When you think about the fact that you walk in there and you have the ability to handle all these guns, just from a gun nut perspective, it's one of those things that makes you think, man, it would be dangerous if I lived, pretty close to here. And so I will say, if there are some guns, if you go into a catalog and you think, man, there's several guns in here I'm really interested in, it might behoove you to make the trip down to, Texas and visit them. And not only that,
the facility's gorgeous.
It's absolutely gorgeous. Oh, absolutely, yes. The auction hall is beautiful. The viewing hall, gorgeous. There's a tank to greet you.
Well, you got to get through all the cannons.
Oh, yeah. There was a Parrott, rifled gun on one side, and 12-pounder on the other. Gatling guns left and right. Really a special hall to walk down to get to the viewing hall. So, I think it's really important from that perspective. The other thing that I think is important is sometimes you just don't know what you're going to get a hold of. And what I mean by that is you might look at a picture of a gun online and you'll look it up and down, left and right, sideways, backways, however, and you go, oh yeah, you know what? That checks out. Now, the unfortunate thing is that the folks at Rock Island are handling thousands of guns per auction. And a sporting and collector auction, such as the one we went to, is actually even less than a premier auction. So while they had four plus that almost 5,000 guns to go through this weekend, a premier auction may be even more than that. And what I'm saying to you is they can't go through every single gun and give you every little detail. They're gonna now. I'll be honest; they'll give you a really good write-up. The descriptions are, in most cases, absolutely indicative of what you're going to see and what you're going to get. However, there were a couple of guns where it absolutely changed the game when I was able to see the guns in person, especially for some guns that Jake was after from 1911, who also joined us down there.
Folks who were working the show on the finish, the fit, just all these little things like, hey, I noticed there might be a ding here, or maybe a dent, or the grip looks chipped. That's the point that Eli's making. Is so much to work with. So take the time, and ask online. And it's worth your time. Point. That's the big thing for stuff.
No, 100%. And that kind of segues us into talking about some of the cool guns that we saw. Now, I kind of do want to take some time and talk about some individual guns while we have a moment before we get into really the drama of the day. Because I'll be honest with you, man, today was fun. We had a great crew of people that showed up, and we really partied, which is something that I don't think the other folks bidding knew was going to happen. But we had a good time, and that's all that matters. So let's talk about some of the cool guns that we saw. I'm going to go, obviously, I want to talk about the Ruger M108.
That was really cool.
Service revolver. So, of course, this is a Service 6 that's U.S. property marked. These guns, of course, were used in replacing the Model 10/Victory model, the K-frame 38, obviously Smith & Wesson revolver, in the late 70s. And so it's a really cool gun. It was issued to everyone from embassy guards in places where we didn't want to seem super militarized, because apparently a revolver is not as intimidating as a big 1911. Not sure how that checks out, but all the way to pilots and air crew. And, they were only around for a little bit. And then, of course, the Beretta M9 came in, and it kind of swept all the other service sidearms out of the way and replaced them in a general sense. So it had a short kind of service life. A lot of the contract overruns went into civilian production, and I think that actually is probably the one we saw. It was a contract overrun in the box, pretty much brand new.
Yeah.
So that was one of those guns that it kind of left field a little bit, because you'd walk by that, and if you didn't know better, you'd think, it's a Ruger revolver. And while they're cool, amongst everything else, you think, I don't think that's really anything spectacular, but it is. It is actually. It's really spectacular. So that's going to be the first gun I was going to mention.
Yeah, and for me, it would be kind of in a similar vein of like one that you might not notice if you don't know what you're looking for, and that was the Munich PKs.
Yeah.
Which those have a unfortunate history associated with them, to put it mildly. Those pistols, so not, forget the provenance. What's cool about those handguns, for me, is the aluminum foil. You can always tell if you're not familiar with it, because it's very discolored in comparison to the slide, just because of the metals. But the other cool thing is these particular examples that were used. So that was really cool to see. Again, it's something that you might go, it's just a pre-war PPK or wartime PPK, whatever. But those have a lot, again, aside from the provenance, as a collector of the PPK, it's someone who's really...
You're right. And, there were a ton of different cool guns, an absolute metric ton of percussion Colt revolvers, and just percussion revolvers in general. And there was also a ton of Colt single-action armies, tons of Winchester rifles, tons of Smith & Wesson revolvers, a lot of 1911s. Not maybe as many 1911s as I thought there would be, but still a healthy amount. Nonetheless, plenty of pocket autos from Colt, and just some absolutely crazy, crazy stuff. So, I kind of...
the lots, too. That's
So I kind of want to hold on to that, though,
Sure.
because it's kind of adds to the drama of the day, in which we've had.
Experience, yeah.
So let's talk another gun. I actually, why don't we talk? We were after some things.
Yeah.
So we did come down here with the intention to make some purchases, to bid on a couple of things. Of course, you and I, for various reasons, are maybe not strapped for cash, but we're certainly not in the market to really be dropping big money on guns.
We weren't walking away with the Thompson and Beretta.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. No, and so we've decided, hey, we want to come down. We want to enjoy Rock Island. I actually had the opportunity to join Rock Island right a few weeks after I turned 21. In fact, that is the place I got my first collectible Colt 1911. 1918, 1911, and it's been pretty much downhill ever since as far as my financials are concerned. And so it means a lot to me to come back to Rock Island, and I wanted to leave with something. Partly for, obviously, your opportunity to buy some really cool stuff that you just don't get to see every day. Partly to also kind of have a little bit of a memory
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, it really is. And so, I was kind of after something that has been really heavy on me as of late. As much as I love 45 ACP, and for some reason people think that this is some sort of trope, this is some sort of character. It's not. Absolutely freaking adore 45 ACP. And so, as someone who loves 45 ACP, I realized I didn't have the 45 ACP pistol. And I know what you're thinking, Eli, you have so many 1911. You're right. I got plenty of 1911s. What I don't have is a 1905. The Colt model 1905, designed by John Moses Browning in response to the Thompson and Lagarde tests for the United States military, in which they decided they would not have a handgun under 45 caliber. So not only in that year did Moses Browning to say, hey, I've developed you a new handgun, he also developed a new cartridge, one that we use today. Now, I'll be honest with you. The cartridge itself, the 45 ACP, has changed a little bit. It used to be, when it originally was introduced, a 200 grain bullet, actually. Of course, by the time the 1911 was adopted, it was eventually beefed up to a 230 grain bullet. But 200 grain bullet, 45 ACP, virtually the cartridge you know today. But that was the very first handgun that it was ever chambered in. And there's a lot of really cool things that are pulled from various different design aspects that John Browning had in play at that time to create that pistol, because it wasn't as simple as taking a Colt 1902 and chamber it in 45, because the operating mechanism, which is at this time a parallel drop barrel, is completely different than the tilting barrel that we know and love today, and it's used in pretty much most auto-loading pistols. And so it's completely different. It couldn't handle the pressure of the 45 ACP. So actually there are locking lugs and locking grooves on the bottom of the barrel that kind of mimic the ones that lock up the barrel in the top. And these are in the frame, kind of corresponding in the frame, so that as the barrel kind of parallel drops into the frame, it has like these lugs to absorb that energy and not allow the basically the barrel to rip itself off from the links under pressures. Anyways, it's a really fantastic firearm. You know what? It's a little bit used. It's got some character. But you know what, man? Like, I've noticed a lot of the 1905s do. Okay, a lot of the 1905s do, because I really believe that these were guns that, when they came out, gunfighters, gunslingers, people who carried guns religiously looked at that and said, I finally have a big bore automatic. That's what I've been waiting on. Americans were really fond of big bore revolvers. Automatics had never at that point really been able to confidently use a big bore cartridge. This is the first real step in that direction. And Americans, I think, really accepted that. So the Colt 1905 was the gun I was after for this auction.
Just targeting something that's also been on my hit list for a really long time. Very, very different, though.
Completely. About as different as it gets.
Yeah, about as different as it gets. And I say, of course, as if you all would. You saw the auction, you saw it was on day one. I'll give it away. Fingertips, as it were.
Sure.
The gyro experimental rocket pistol of MacBee's song. The gun Space Race Hot had the first intergalactic kill.
Yeah.
Which, man, what
crazy gun. Dude, it didn't even feel real.
They didn't decide. It was hopeful, right? Because the gun I've only ever cased
with some rockets.
With EA associates really took it up. It's basically cartridges that were all set up for a pistol.
Oh, cool.
It get a contract for the film, and it is serial number JB enough to hold that. Thanks to our friend Logan, who's high caliber history.
Okay. Yeah.
He was working. It was really special to me, actually. It was a gun that was on a set of his gloves, holding a Sean. It lived in that suit pocket for just a little good luck charm while I was traveling. You know, when a gyrojet can give it a go. Now the problem for me on the drama of the day was about 1,000 lots went across the block today, starting around 9 a.m. And this was lot 996. So it was a long day. In fact, it was such a long day, and we had such a long drive home that based on where things were going that were a little more eclectic, I kind of assumed that I was going to come out not on top. And frankly, sitting around another hour or two just to get swept under the rug in about 2 seconds didn't really seem super appealing. So we put in a sealed bid, which is a cool thing you can do, where you say, hey, this is my top dollar, and you can add +1, +2 on top of that, and then I'm out. You sign it, and get out of there. You can also do that via online. So that's another thing to do. Set it and forget it, right?
Right.
So we hit the road. We were watching the auction, and we watched it go across the block. $550 over what I was hoping to go for. So that's a high enough amount, including the buyer's premium and everything else you have to pay. So we can feel good about the fact that they didn't go in on it. If it was $100, I think Eli would have made me pull over so he could beat the tar out of me. It was a pretty interesting day, to be sure.
Well, and, you kind of course, you told the story there of the gyrojet. That is one part of the day.
Well, I wanted to give the disappointment first, because there's a lot of really cool stuff that did happen that was positive. So get that out of the way.
Yeah, no, and listen, that's a cool example, because, of course, like, you go to Rock Island, it's not like guns.com. It's not like a gun store where you say, I want this product, I will give you cash for it, and I will leave with it. It is very much like, hey, I want this, you want this, and we're gonna see who blinks first. And it's really, I'm telling y'all, is a pretty freaking wild deal.
Well, yeah, like those Lugers today. You could have been picking up Lugers like they were cord wood.
Yeah, that was actually, if you were interested in a Luger ever in your life, this was the time to get a Luger, because they were just handing them out, it seems.
It was a time. I braved Walther PP.
No, it wasn't. So let's get a little bit into the actual day of auctioning. And pretty interesting day. We started out our day with a leg day, by the way, in the hotel. That was fun. A little bit of sweating. And, of course, we would be remiss to not mention the fact that Jake from 1911 Syndicate, who has been a guest, or we have been a guest separately, of course, on the 1911 Syndicate, right? and he was there. He was actually after a myriad of guns.
Yes,
he was after
his video speak for all that.
Yeah, of course, he's got a video coming out. It's interesting because obviously Crispy isn't the one who did the video on it. Nick the Dick, my boss from Cabot Guns, was.
Big man himself.
So, we can't really comment to the quality of the video, but the video will be there nonetheless. And it is a fun video. So Jake had brought his friend Matt, and off the street, kind of.
Yeah.
He kind of knew him from 1911 Syndicate, met him at the airport because the dude, did EOD security at the airport.
Super cool.
Right, and Jay's like, hey, you want to go to the auction? He's like, hell yeah, and he shows up. Nick the Dick shows up. We had Calvin show up. We had a group of people show up, and we had Jordan. How could I forget Jordan? I was upset he didn't try to bid on anything, but I understand. And it really was a hell of a party. So, of course, we were going back and forth filming for 1911 Syndicate. We didn't really have auction lots starting until about midway through, about 6-something, is when things were getting interesting for us.
Now, and here's why, too.
Sure.
One thing that I think is this, the lots are thoughtfully packed together in item of interest. So we were looking for, mid-century autos or early-century automatics. Not the percussion stuff necessarily, things like that. So we had a lot of stuff that needed to come first before we came up on the block.
Yeah, basically a lot of what Rock usually does is I've seen them put some really heavy hitter guns at the beginning of the day, specifically usually Winchester rifles, Colt single actions, things like that. Then they kind of move into some other rifles, and then they kind of go into percussion revolvers typically, and sprinkle in rifles here and there. And then, like you said, their autos are batched together. Like Colts are typically batched together. And, you may have 2 or 3 batches throughout that day. So where we started getting kind of involved was, all of a sudden, Matt and Nick were like, they kind of got swept up in the emotion. And it is, you start seeing guns go across the block, and it starts to get emotional. We saw the Walther PP engraved. Keep in mind, this is a gun that was estimated to be between like 1,700 and 2,700, somewhere in there. That gun, there was a massive bidding war. That gun got to 35, 33.5 or something like that. 32.5 or something like that. Yeah. That gun went for 30 grand more than what it was estimated at being at. And then right after, a Luger might go for $500 less than what it was top estimate. So it was a wild time. And you start seeing guns where you're like, oh, that's cool, but I'll probably not have enough money for that. You start seeing these going across the block, and they're going for things you would say, man, I'd buy that at that price.
Well, the thing is, too, is like you have to make that decision so fast.
Right. Yeah, because there's so many auctions, or excuse me, so many lots, you really only have 30 seconds, a minute max.
Now, more than a minute, you're not.
If that goes longer than a minute, I promise you, the checkbook is going to have to be putting a lot of zeros on the end of it, because, of course, that's when auctions start getting pretty expensive. In that regard. Yeah, it's a great time. It's really fun. So how it started out, our buddies Nick and Matt, they're wanting the 1911. Now, luckily, neither of them want something that's of a crazy collector value, and that's good. That's what the February Sporting and Collector auctions for, in my opinion. It's really good about getting some. There's obviously some crazy pieces to add to collections, but in my opinion, most
it's not 98% safe.
Well, and most of the guns that went across the block were re-arsenal guns. And that's cool because there is the history. Yep. You've got, a lot of them 1911s, not 1911 A1s. You got the history. They were re-arsenaled. You assume went through both the First World War and World War II. And so there's a lot of history in that regard. And then, of course, whatever, happened after the gun was arsenaled, post-World War II. It's really interesting in that regard. And typically because Colt collectors and 1911 collectors want the honeys. They want guns that they don't have to make excuses for, as a lot of folks say. Those guns sort of slip under the radar. Now, there were some interesting moves in that regard early on. A lot of CMP guns actually went way higher than I would have expected. But some other guns went kind of under the radar. And Nick sort of blinked real early on. He had the opportunity to pick up a 1911 for pretty freaking cheap, and he blinked. I'm not exactly sure what was going on there, but he decided to blink. And the way you have to do it is you have to have backups. Even if there's something you really want, if you're saying, hey, I'm getting something, you better have backups so that you can have a, if the first one doesn't work out. So anyways, Nick's kind of going through it. He misses out on the first one. Our buddy Matt, he's deciding he's getting into it. He gets into a really cool re-arsenal gun for a good deal. He's super stoked. Keep in mind, we brought him off the freaking street. Yep. He got his bidder card like pretty late. Like there was not a lot of time between the time he got his bidder card and actually won his first 1911, by the way. So then coming up, there was, of course, the gun that Jake was after, serial number C666, and that is a Colt government model, first year production. Of course, not only first year production, obviously serial number 666. Jake's going to hell anyways, might as well expedite it. And so it's one of those things where unique gun built on a really desirable gun, desirable year. I decided to take a look at that gun for Jake. I took the gun apart, of course. By the way, this is another thing for the viewing. We may have mentioned it earlier. If you do want to take the guns apart, you can walk to the back, and of course, supervised, you can take them apart. I would not do that, though, if you're not familiar with the gun that you're taking apart. So, if you've never taken apart a Borchardt, probably don't. They may not let you take apart the bore chart.
They'll laugh you out of the room.
But if you've never taken apart a Mauser C96 broom handle, don't go back there wanting to take apart a Mauser C96 broom handle. Anyways, and to that note, Jake had brought a wad of cash to get that gun, and the pictures we saw looked. There was some things where I was like, listen, Jake, I think for the lore, it's worth overpaying for, which is kind of a unique thing. I don't ever want to give people bad advice, but it's one of those things where it's like, you really want that serial number, it's worth overpaying for based on that. The gun was refinished. The gun did have sights, and of course the stocks were replaced, which kind of clued me in. Guns that have the stocks replaced, you sometimes ask why. Found out why. That gun had some damage to the frame, and I told Jake, I mean, it wasn't major, it didn't seem to impede function, but I did tell Jake, hey, listen, if I were you, I'd hard cap it at this number here. And he's like, wow, that's pretty low. I said, just trust me on this. Well, no one else thought that. And when C6 came across the block, that bastard went across at 5,500, of course, before the buyer's premium. And listen, it's a desirable serial number, I guess. I'm a God-fearing Southern Baptist that holds snakes, so to me maybe not so much. But someone without a soul like Jake, of course, that is a desirable serial number. But of course, it's also a desirable year range for a government model. So, when you play all these factors together, you understand that, yeah, that gun was destined to probably go for a lot. Quickly after that, few lots later, there was a Colt 1902. Now, lately, Nick has expressed a lot of interest for a Colt 1902. We actually did a 1902 tribute on the Cabot for Cabot Gun of the Month, a gun that I kind of cooked up last year, actually. My actual first gun that I'd ever designed for, in process with Cabot. Typically, most of the stuff I come up with is for the Alchemy Resto mods, but this is one that I came up with for Cabot, and they kind of, did, put a little Cabot flair on there. And it's a great looking gun. So Nick has been interested in one of those, and he wants one that was similar to the one that I, mocked up. And of course, that was an early 1902 with the forward, checkering, not serrations, which they did do later. And I kind of had to tell him, listen, dude, that's big bucks, big dollar signs. So maybe you should, change your expectations. And he did. And there was a nice, really nice, honest wear 1902 military. That's going to be with the longer magazine, lanyard loop, and squared back frame. It came across the block, 1909 manufacturer. And he ended up popping it for well under, what I thought was reasonable. Yeah, it popped it for right under what I thought was reasonable, and I think he's pretty happy with that decision. So then we come into the gun that I was after, and at this point, I'm pretty nervous because anything with COLT on it seemed to go pretty high.
The German stuff was going lower, and the Americana stuff was
yeah. The 1902 Colt that Nick scored was sort of by itself, actually. Yeah. I feel like maybe
old guys stepped out
the
of
Colt.
the room,
I don't know.
Again,
yeah,
go to wash your hands or something for like 2 minutes, or go to get a drink at the bar in the back.
Yep, absolutely. And so I don't know what happened. He got a pretty good deal on that gun. But by this point, we're down to a gun that I'm after. Now, it's behind a couple of pretty big priced guns. And all of these Colts, there was a few Colt revolvers, 2 Colt government models, and all of them went for decently priced, like more than I was hoping they would. And so it seemed like the Colt dudes were locked in. My 1905 goes across the block, and I'd kind of specifically picked this one because it actually, finish-wise, wasn't of the best condition. And you know what? I like the story. I like the history of that. All original finish, just not. Yeah, absolutely. It's just a gun that's been used, and that's cool. Mechanically, though, actually, it was pretty excellent. It seemed more like a gun that has been carried less than it's been shot. So that's pretty cool there. But with that being said, so it comes across the block, and my strategy for doing this is I like to wait for the first call. So I let everybody kind of get everything out of their system. They go first call. I hit them like, yeah. And another thing too, not many people were doing the whole
Yep.
Auctioneer call thing. And that is part of the fun. So, pumping with adrenaline like nothing else, I'm throwing that auction thing. And I think I get hit back. I think it was at 13. I get hit back 14. Or maybe it was at 14. I go to 15. Something like that. Anyways, gun ended up at 1600.
30 seconds.
Oh my gosh,
live.
I know. And I don't remember who it was on my gun, but he's holding the gavel, and I'm just like, hammer the sumbitch. Let's go home.
Like, do you want another one? Do you want another option?
Yeah, and so boom, I
it's
went.
talking like a lightning. You're like, this is dragging on.
Finally, boom. The guy on the phone bows out, and dude, boom, 1905 is in the collection. And, we're sitting there high-fiving one of touchdown celebrations. Not really, but you know what I mean. We're sitting there having a freaking good time. We're jacked up. Every time someone bought something from our table, we're just absolutely losing it, man. And it's pretty hilarious because I'm sure to all these, like, veteran bidders who, you spent $1,000 on something, woohoo. But to us, it was just so much fun, man. And we seemed like we were probably one of the few groups having a lot of fun. So, there's
some the set of ladies with the mimosas next to us. They seem to be having
a great time. Listen, with an open,
with the open bar.
Yeah, with an open bar, it's hard to. I don't drink, but from reviews of people who do, an open bar is a big plus. So, anyways, we go as soon, and this is kind of what we were talking about with you got to be on your game. As soon as my lot is over, Jake's backup lot to C66 is up. Like mine is like 731, his is like 732. And we're kind of in the midst of celebratory activities.
Like, oh, shit.
And then we're like, holy shit, no, we got to get back into the game. Truly, they were like in the middle of it by the time that we kind of sobered up for a second. Yeah, and I was like, grab your card. And Jake ended up pulling off an absolutely nuts deal. A 1903 pocket hammerless and a 1908 vest pocket, both in really nice condition. I think $1,000, maybe $1,100.
I think it was 11, maybe.
Yeah. $1,100. I about shit myself. I mean, that was a nuts pickup, and this is kind of where I think you can plug the double auction deal.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So at this point, my heart's in my throat. I've just seen 3 of my buddies come across the block.
And a guy you don't even know.
And a guy I don't know. But specifically, the 3 of you guys were like in a consecutive order.
Sure.
We usually spend like 5 minutes. Everyone's like super stoked. These guns that you guys came for, backup plans, whatever. It's a bit more of a conundrum because what I wanted was at the end of the day. But I just saw a double lot of guns that I adored go across the block with Jake for a pretty reasonable price. And the exact lot following it was yet another 1903, 1908 combo. And they were 2 really cool guns, to be honest. Like the 1908 had a cold letter with it, confirmed where it had been shipped to. Big city gun meant that it was probably going to carry it with all sorts of cool stuff. I almost blinked and went for it. And man, I should have, because those 2 went across for 800.
Yeah, which is,
insane.
I mean, that's not even real life. So, what we kind of want to tell you with this is, you think you go to Rock Island, you think it's all about selling Teddy Roosevelt's.
Oh, yeah. Like the Han Solo blaster, they broke like a Guinness World Record with that one.
Yeah, you think that's what they're about, and it is. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, 100%.
They do sell guns for, man, really reasonable price. I mean, dude, I literally was jaw on the floor. And I think that I was so shocked. I would have been. But I was so shocked.
What you had just accomplished yourself.
Right, like I'm still on the high of getting the 05, still kind of patting myself in the back there. That
you probably could have walked away with 3 ponies.
By the time that I turn around and notice that this thing's hammering at 800, it hammered. And so it was one of those things that, I'm glad we got to see it. I'm glad we got to have a good time.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And of course, after that, Jake is so stoked that he's saved more, Jake thought he was going to be in the auction $3,000 by this point. And he's so stoked he ends up with an actually never been fired Colt single action army, early 3rd gen gun. It looks like, honestly, it probably lived in its box. When I went back and looked at the gun with him, the box even had the plastic sleeve the gun went in. And there was a little divot for all your paperwork. It still had the piece of paper that said something about like don't remove or something like that, or piece of tape going across that, which I'd never actually seen. That's kind of how crazy that was. So it's one of those things where it's pretty crazy. So all in all, of course, unfortunately, Caleb didn't take home the gyro jet.
2 more days of the auction.
There are 2 more days,
and even we can bid online, and I will be.
And even though we're we're going to be not at the auction, who will be you will be bidding online, and of course Jake will be bidding online. There is a gun that he is after. I don't know when this will come out. I don't know if we're going to put it out immediately, but I don't want to spoil it for y'all, because if he does get it, if this happens, it will be the coolest gun that Jake will ever own.
Oh yeah. No,
and listen. Jake owns Alchemies, and I am a diehard Alchemy fan. I'm the sales guy, and I'm going to tell you right now, if Jake wins this gun, it's cooler than even an Alchemy. And so I'm not going to ruin it for you, but I'm really hoping he wins that gun. Yeah, like I said, unfortunately, the gyro jet didn't come home with the crew. But all in all, we ended up with a Colt Arsenal rebuilt M1911 with Springfield slide. Pretty cool, actually. We ended up with a Colt 1902 military, Colt 1905 first 45 ACP pistol. We ended up with the 1903 pocket hammerless, 1908 vest pocket, and of course Jake's third gen Colt single action army. That's a 5.5-inch barrel gun, 45 Colt. So first of all, the pony definitely ruled the day.
It was in fact rampant.
Yeah, the pony was rampant, and it's funny because I feel like an old Colt influencer, because it just seems like, I don't know, when I get around people and start talking about the history of the Colt manufacturing company, people really are like, man, I want to be a part of that. I want to live.
It's a history and a heritage that you can really glom onto, even if you're a seasoned gun guy, because you're lying to yourself and don't love American heritage brands. Because the heritage existing on the civilization that you're a part of, and whether you admit it or not, you are proud of that, and you want to be a part of that history, and you want to celebrate that history. Damn it, that means you want to carry.
And listen, man, my whole big thing is like, you should be owning Smith & Wesson revolvers, Colt automatics, Winchester rifles, and Remington shotguns. From a kind of pre-war perspective. And obviously, that's a little bit of generalization. Right. Well, I'm going Remington Model 11 because it's at least the American copy of the gun. Licensed, by the way. Licensed. And so, anyways, I think that we had a great time. Of course, like I said, I just suck that the gyro jet doesn't come home.
We didn't get to see our friend Keith. We were looking forward to seeing Keith Ford out there.
Oh, yeah. Got super sick.
He's super ill. Rock Island was coming down with it. I'm blaming the 6.66 gun personally.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we can see Keith Ford.
And speaking of the Rock Island team, gosh, those guys are awesome.
Oh my gosh, every single one of those guys that was provided to experience that you can only describe. So it's like 5 minutes from the Dallas airport, guys. So if you're flying instead of driving, there's so many hotels right there. You can find a place inexpensive to lodge at. Even if you're just gonna go out to say like a May, just to experience seeing amazing guns go across, do it. I feel like it's a pilgrimage most gun guys can.
Yeah, and I'm not even saying that you have to go there every single auction, but I'm saying, man, make the trip for one, And like, you're in Dallas. I'm not saying that I think Dallas is the greatest city of all time, but I'm also saying that you can make a trip out of it. You can make a trip out of it. You can enjoy your time here. Dallas has things to do. So, Dallas, Fort Worth, of course. And so, you can enjoy yourself and also visit Rock Island for the auction, which again, it really is a hell of an experience. It's a roller coaster of emotions. I highly suggest doing it with friends.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem very fun if you're just sitting there with your nose in the catalog. Yeah. But if you've got a group of dudes and everyone's sort of like, yeah, I want something.
Each other up about what they're going to
do. Yeah, I want something. And there should be some natural male ribbing involved. Like, 100%. Hey, what the fuck, man? Why'd you let that go?
That card up,
yeah, put your dick on the table. Come on, let's go. And, but also keep in mind that every single gun that we got was either at very fair value or well undervalued. And so, that is just to go to show you again, you don't have to spend a ton of money to have something cool. Okay.
Yeah.
You do not have to spend a ton of money to have something cool. It's all about the swagger and style of what you spend your money on. Okay. Like,
Got it too. I mean, come on.
and take the time to educate yourself. I mean, that's what I think I
Absolutely.
enjoyed about the Rock Island experience this time around is
Like
I
the
got
Ruger,
to.
you know, like
Oh, yeah, and I knew about them. I knew they existed, but that was sort of where it
kind of
ended.
just like a surface level
Right.
thing. Like
I
if
was
there
like,
was a Marshall pistol, it was a Ruger. Okay.
yeah, like a Ruger Service 6 that was a martially marked. Okay. But, I was like kind of interested in it. And then my buddy was like, listen, if you try to outbid me on this, I will take you to
the flying elbows coming down.
I'll take you to the cleaners. And coming from a dude who buys transferable machine guns, that's not the guy you want to get in a bidding war over, a Ruger Marshall revolver. And so, I of course bowed out on that regard, but it's one of those things you learn something, and it also gives you a chance to put your hands on history. There are guns that you just didn't know you'd ever get to hold. For instance, one of the ones that I really kind of from day two, it's coming tomorrow. I'm very interested in what it goes for. There was a Winchester 1895 405. Of course, that being tied to Theodore Roosevelt. So, I really think that's an excellent gun, and it's a ton of Americana. So, like I said, there's something for everybody. When you go in person, you get to put your hands on guns that you never thought. Honestly, you probably shouldn't be allowed to put your hands on. I kind of thought about that a little bit. I was like, man, I don't know if I should be able to hold this.
Right.
But yeah, we did
You
anyway.
know what they say there? Not all art is strange.
Oh my God,
That's such a
dude!
good
When I
line.
saw that on the wall, I was like, "Are you shitting me?" And it's so true. Whether it be, the beat up, 1905, or that gorgeously engraved. My God, that was another good one.
Amazing.
That $2,000 for a fully engraved K38. I was like, oh my God, because that was on part of my backup. That was in my backup plan because I love engraved guns. I'm kind of like weirdly obsessed with engraved guns right now, especially. So, anyways, with that, ladies and gentlemen, you have got us through the last hour of our drive. We are 2 minutes from La Casa, and it is 1:32 in the morning. Okay, I had to pay a few tolls through the absolutely terrible state of Oklahoma.
But that's what we're willing to go through. That's what we're willing to go through to get to the Rock Island Auction Company.
Right, Oklahoma, purgatory. And listen, again, as a Southern Baptist, I don't really believe in purgatory. However, the Catholic, Caleb, drove me through Oklahoma. I looked to him and I said, you know what? I get it. I think
there's a castle on the side of the road that shares a lot with some trailer park.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, you might have me on this one. The drinking, the wine every weekend, not sure on that one, but you got me on the purgatory. I think that's a real deal. So, anyways, thank y'all so much for joining us. We had a great time. We just had a great time. We had a great time filming this. We have had a great time going down to Rock Island. Rock Island, if you are watching this, thank y'all. Thank y'all for having us. We have had a great time. Y'all be good. We're gonna go to sleep.
Yes.
All right. I'll talk to y'all later.